Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and across from me is the Doctor himself.
Hello.
Each week, we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners just like you. I like to, bring the speed up and pull it down. And
Well, yeah, I mean, I just never know what's happening next. I'm on the edge of my seat.
As you should be.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Wow. We're both sweating so much.
Friend.
And why are we sweating?
Because we're talking about the news. There we go. There's been a bunch of this week, but we're getting a lot of new Shazam footage.
Yeah.
We're getting some transition. The one where he's jumping off the building. And
Yeah, so it seems shorter than a full trailer. I think I heard the trailer might drop on Tuesday, so by the time we're listening to this, we might have a new trailer for Shazam. But there are a couple of little shots that seem pretty neat. Like, yeah, the one is Billy jumping off a roof and yelling Shazam.
And the lightning bolt.
So you just see the whole thing happen. He jumps off the roof, and then the lightning bolt hits, and then he flies off as Shazam. It's a really cool shot.
I love that shot. I thought that was so cool.
You get, maybe another, half of a second worth of Dr. Savannah.
Dr. Savannah.
And scene.
Yeah. That's as far as that goes.
Yeah. There's a few new things in there. I think you can see the statues of the 7 deadly sins in the Rock of Eternity.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to another sort of full trailer. Yeah, I'm excited for this movie. I've talked about this a lot. We've talked about how excited we are, especially after Aquaman, feels like things are headed the right direction.
Well, they haven't done anything where they're putting really good music and cool frames together and making a trailer. They're just showing you footage, and it happens to be great, which makes me think that this is going to be a great movie.
You know what's funny is just scrolling Twitter, right? Videos play, but not instantly with sound. And the number of things that I've seen where I've been like, wow, that's super cool, before I bother to hit the sound. It's that's probably a good sign.
Yeah. I think that's a huge thing because, Suicide Squad.
Yeah. Although, conversely, there's at least one scene in Aquaman that could have benefited from not having any sound.
You're really testing me, aren't you? That's... You're really testing.
So much sweat.
Oh, my God. Oh, golly.
This might be the shortest episode we've ever done.
Oh, my God. Is all of our vamping just inappropriate?
I feel like it might be.
Oh,
but we're about to find out.
Yeah, we certainly are. Let's go to the next piece of news.
Sure, yeah.
DC goes primal with new Target exclusive Primal Age Giant.
Primal Age Giant?
Yeah.
So sorry, this is another one of those 100-page comic books like they do with Walmart?
Apparently.
But it's exclusive to Target?
Let's read more. Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, it's definitely a 100-page
sure
exclusive thing. Let's see. DC Entertainment has partnered with the big box retailer Target for a new 100-page giant anthology promoting the DC Primal Age Funko toy line.
Well, and what is the Primal Age Funko toy line?
It's a great. Basically, it's a one shot is rooted in the sword and sorcery genre and creates a barbarian mythos behind the Funko action figures presenting glimpses into the reimagined backstories and superpowers of Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and other iconic DC characters.
So it's like an Elseworldsy thing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm so up for more of that type of stuff. I have an image here that's kind of neat.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, that is neat. Oh, I'm kind of into that. It kind of feels like a Masters of the Universe sort of thing, like He-Man.
Dream Warriors.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
I'm so the more of this type of stuff.
I hadn't heard about that, but that might also be because it's not relevant in Canada because Target like retreated. Like we got a bunch of Targets, and then like within a year they were all gone. It was like a big miscalculation. The stores didn't take.
That was the saddest moment ever. The amount of great furniture I got from there.
They had furniture?
Yeah.
I never went in.
You're the problem.
Yeah. That's right. I didn't go to all like 100 retail outlets.
If you had, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Yeah. We're currently in the darkest timeline where I don't support Target.
Truly the darkest of times. I love that they keep doing these type of things. I think that it's great to see comics coming back into sort of these mainstream like department stores and shops again. Because I mean that was so prevalent in the 80s and 70s and 60s and
I mean like you used to like you pulled into like a gas station, there was always like a spinner rack of comics or whatever, and that's less and less a thing. And part of that's like a business model thing, right? It's tough to just like ship comics everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's a very niche thing, but then the fallout of that is if you don't have a way in, like you know someone or it's sort of in your family or whatever, it can be daunting to go into a specialized store to just try something. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think what the equivalent is for me. It's probably like going into some sort of sporting goods store and being like, oh, so which of these skis is for downhill? But you know what I mean though, right? Like it's, you know, there's a bit of a barrier to entry. So these things where they're in Walmart or Target where people who are not necessarily reading comics, but might have sort of passing awareness, or maybe not even, will go past them. It might spark an interest. They might read something and find something to be interested in or passionate about.
I also like the idea too that you can have parents going through and looking for books for their kids and seeing something like this, and that might get a new generation of kids into comic books, which weren't before.
Yeah.
I think,
well, definitely. And that's certainly the more important. But then the other thing too is, you know, there might be some people that are sort of like lapsed comic book people that maybe when they were like kids and teenagers read a bunch, collected a bunch.
Definitely.
You know, and then life happens, right? And then you have other things to pay for. Maybe they will walk past and go, you know what? It's about time I read Batman again.
I think this. I'm never upset with these. I know that some people get kind of defensive about these not being like these comics not being released in comic book stores and things like that.
Well, and the other important thing is that they're not in continuity. They're just stories, which is like what most of comic books was before like the mid 70s. So, yeah, I think it's great. I agree.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go to the next piece of news, which is a little unfortunate news that we had this week. A Marvel and DC legend, George Perez, retires.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, normally when we say unfortunate news, it's much worse than a retiring.
Yeah, he did not pass
worse
on
than retirement.
But I mean, he's brought a lot to DC specifically.
I mean, if George Perez is one of maybe the most iconic DC artists, and among his works is Crisis on Infinite Earths, like the big original, you know, change the whole continuity sort of series. You know, lots of stuff with, you know, Teen Titans,
the new Teen Titans specifically.
You know, and
Wonder Woman. I mean, tons of work with like
Wonder Woman's another huge
the late 80s Wonder Woman. I think,
but the thing that I love about his style is that it doesn't feel dated. You know, like if you read those comics, you know, like Crisis or whatever from the 80s, it doesn't look old. It doesn't look like poorly done. Like his artwork is such like a I don't know. I think it's just kind of that it's in a way it's very basic.
Yeah.
You know, it's not overly stylized in almost to the point where if you know something about artists, you wouldn't necessarily be able to pick out George Perez.
I can see that. Yeah,
you can, but you know what I mean. Like it's not going like really
overly stylized. It's very
like Alex Ross, where it's like there's only one person that does something like this. But it's so consistent.
No Lemire, that's for sure. Yeah,
he does such a good job of like showing emotion in people's faces and things like that. And, you know, when they brought him back to work on Infinite Crisis and things like that, like there's some incredibly expressive artwork in there. But yeah, it's kind of sad that he's retiring, but like he deserves it. He's earned it.
Well, absolutely. I think, which kind of leads us to the next piece of news, which is somebody who does have a very distinctive style.
Sure.
Which is DC has just recently hired Rick Leonardi for Batman Beyond.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't that this is typically a Marvel artist, does a ton of work with Spider-Man.
I haven't heard that at all.
Yeah, which I think that combination actually makes a ton of sense when you start looking at the sort of breadth of his work. I think that it makes it. I don't know. I think that combination could be really cool. And
holy cow! Wow, that is very interesting. Because Batman Beyond is such a direct thing for him to move to too, because wasn't the Spider-Man that he did Spider-Man 2099?
I believe so, yeah.
Like what's his name, Miguel something? I don't know enough about Marvel, but
yeah, wow, they've listened to that episode.
But the idea that it's like that sort of like neo future sort of thing, it's kind of perfect,
right?
It's big. I feel like DC's been biting a lot of big talent from Marvel in the last few years. Say what you will, whether or not you like his art, but like they got John Romita Jr. for a little bit there. They got Bendis, obviously. You know, like it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the next piece of news,
sure.
Which is that the Batman film that's being developed.
Right.
We keep hearing different information about it. We're apparently it's going to be getting a second villain, so it's not just going to be the Penguin.
Have we even confirmed that it's the Penguin, though? Or I feel like everything is still rumor. The only thing that I know is that it's now called Untitled Batman Film, so it might not even be called The Batman.
I don't know.
So if anything, we know less.
I mean, we're getting it like on the THR report, which is like a pretty you can generally like stand by what they're saying.
I know the Penguin's been bandied about a lot, but there was rumor for a bit that the Penguin was going to be the villain for Birds of Prey before they announced that it was Black Mask. So, right, but that there might be a second one as well.
Yeah, which
so who would you want to see as like an additional villain to the Penguin, or like a partnering villain with the Penguin?
Yeah, well, I mean, first you have to kind of think about who's already been used and who could use. I don't want a Joker.
Sure,
I don't.
Yeah. There's too much.
We're getting too much of that.
We're also
right
getting
now.
a Joker movie.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like there's too much Joker in the atmosphere. We're getting one already. I don't need another one.
Yeah.
I think I don't need a Scarecrow, because I think that they did Scarecrow well. Who I would love to see get their due is Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze deserves something good.
I just feel like if you really...
Are you also putting them together because they have sort of like the ice theme, like the Penguin and Mr. Freeze?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't hate that, by the way. That's not a bad idea. I was wondering if
they do work a lot well together. I think that I would always want an Ivy movie, but I think that I want that to be a separate thing. I think that could be a very even just like an Ivy movie on their own.
Sure.
I would watch. I just would want that.
Or more in the context of like those natural kingdoms. Like,
well, that's what I mean, right?
Swamp Thing kind of, you know.
I just think that Mr. Freeze, and especially with some of the narrative that we've been given through the Batman the Animated Series and things like that, has such a gripping and emotional storyline that we clearly haven't been given in a live action series yet.
What do you mean?
Literally the opposite of this like tortured art. Like
the performance of Arnold Schwarzenegger's career.
That might still be true. That doesn't mean that it's good.
A laundry service that delivers. Wow. Okay, if we keep going through the rumors, I remember that this Batman movie was supposed to maybe be like an early career kind of thing. So the Penguin kind of makes sense because he's sort of tied to that mob history of of Gotham, but also like the Cobblepots are like a Gotham family in the way that the Waynes are.
Yeah.
So that makes sense if you're doing an early career thing to tie the Penguin in. I'm trying to think of like who would make sense as another early career villain.
Like Deathstroke?
So yeah, I would say not Two-Face because that comes a little later.
Yeah.
It's for the same reason I'd say not the Joker.
Deathstroke, what do you think?
Could possibly be, yeah. You know, he's a mercenary. Might be someone like the Penguin would hire.
It's somebody who's not
maybe
very
also
interesting.
Like the Riddler. Like, where does does the Penguin have this person he relies on for information? Like, and maybe over the course of the movie goes from sort of just like an info person to becoming a supervillain in his own right. You know, like if it's a bit of like the Riddler becoming a thing. I'm also thinking a little bit of Zero Year from the comics, but that's like a way more extreme sort of story. But the Riddler is basically there like near the beginning of Batman in that story. So yeah, there's lots of ways to go. Plus there's so many villains that just like don't get used. Firefly or Clayface, Killer Moth. Killer Moth doesn't make sense, but
I think Clayface, I think we're still not in a place where I want to see a version of Clayface on the TV. Like,
it doesn't feel like that's the direction that movie is going.
No.
The movie feels like it's going to like a more Nolan-y kind of territory, like mob, gangsters, stuff like that. And even
ventriloquist?
Maybe. Right?
Yeah.
Or it just adds like a little bit thing, even if he's not like the second one.
Yeah, like, we got this crazy guy over here with his doll.
Yeah, I mean, like that stuff kind of makes sense to me too.
Yeah,
but we're getting like Victor Zsasz and Black Mask in Birds of Prey, like those sort of Gotham-y kind of worlds. Even Suicide Squad really, with the exception of Enchantress, really toned down what the powers sort of aspect was.
Yeah.
It was like Boomerang Guy and Baseball Bat Girl and like, you know what I mean? Like it's pretty grounded relatively.
Yeah.
So it kind of, it would make sense to me if it wasn't something like Clayface or, Amygdala or like a really crazy character.
And so this last piece of news is not really that much of news and thing that we've kind of already assumed, but it's something worth talking about. And I'm glad that they're from a corporate level, they're talking about it, which is after Aquaman, I think they've come to terms with the fact that they're going to go with a less shared universe focus.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one of the first announcements when all of those big, like, executive level shakeups were happening post Justice League.
But I mean, this was coming specifically from a board member, from I think a chair. So I think that like,
I think that's fine. Keep in mind, they're not saying these movies are not connected. That's not what they're saying. But instead of every movie having to have this component where it's like, and what is next?
Yeah.
And what are we setting up and what's happening over there? Instead of having to draw focus and worry about that, they'll just make movies about cool superheroes. And if there's ways for them to connect that make sense, then that's a door that's open to them. But it's not like the driving force the way that it is over at Marvel, which is like, these are all just chapters of one story. DC is saying like, these are different stories. Occasionally they'll come together.
That being said, did you see Zack Snyder release this like weird graphic of like what his vision of the connected universe was going to be?
Well, is that what it is? I thought it was some thing where he's like selling shirts for charity or something.
So the way that it was pitched to me was that it was like his map of.
I don't know that it makes a ton of sense as a map, but it's a cool design, and I'm pretty sure he was selling the like t-shirts or something for like a charity, like a.
I kind of just want that as a tattoo.
It's pretty cool looking. Again, I'm not 100% sure it makes sense as a map, but it's a cool looking design.
Well, so I'm reading the article, and it basically says it's no secret that Zack Snyder did not get a chance to fully show us his master plan for the DCEU, but that hasn't stopped him from revealing his vision of the Justice League saga, which would have been in a 5-part movie series.
Right.
So yeah, and basically to show his 5-part plan, the DCU, Zack Snyder did what Zack Snyder always does. Zack Snyder created a cryptic tree of life of sorts.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, but I'm like looking at that and I was like, man, I want that.
It looks cool.
I want that as a tattoo.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing to get a tattoo of, but it's so cool looking and it has all the cool things that I enjoy.
It is pretty cool. I don't know that I'd get it as a tattoo, but as mentioned, I believe it's in support of a good cause. So if you like that design, go get a t-shirt or something.
I think I at least might do that, but
yeah.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, that's the news for this week.
We did it.
Which means that we
How many minutes has it been?
Not enough. I know. Who knew our Achilles heel was being appropriate?
Yeah.
So
it's really killing my energy.
Yep. Well, I'm also just getting over food poisoning, so I'm already coming in at a lower level.
Sure, that's right. That's
but this week we've just passed the 100 mark. We are heading into the hundreds for our episode. Right. But the only way we can do that is by taking
next century.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But the only way we can do that is by taking the first step, which is something that we're going to help you do with
which
comics.
We should have done in the first place.
Yeah, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers. We're talking. This is episode 101. We're talking comics 101. We're gonna overview sort of how do you get into comics? What are the basic sort of initial questions that you might have if you're interested in getting into comics?
And these are questions that we do get a lot. Like periodically.
Yeah.
We get lots of questions from people that are in the vein of even people that do read comics but are maybe interested in a new character or something like that. Lots of like, what is the entry point, or like, how do I get into this?
Or I have a significant other or a child who wants to get into comics.
Yeah, exactly. We get lots of those. So it's about time actually that we've done that. And our solemn pledge for this episode as well, to make it as accessible as possible.
That's right.
Is that we were going to do this episode clean.
Yes.
No swears, no innuendos. Dashiell, turn on the podcast. We've waited 101 episodes to say it.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. So let's start getting into. We got a whole ton of questions.
Yeah, we did actually.
So first, we just head on over to Twitter.
Twitter.
Oh, that was nice.
I'm back.
Yeah, back, baby.
I'm back, baby.
Well, it can't have a first question not be from this person. Stump Chunkman. Step into the stump. Stump Chunkman. Did you almost forget it?
Well, no, there's a moment in my head where I was like, is that drop appropriate? And then I was like, oh yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah. No, I think there's only one person that would be
inappropriate. See how little I trust the content of this show to be appropriate. It's like...
You must trust it a little bit because you're letting me steer the ship usually, so...
Well, yeah, that's... Oh... You shouldn't have pointed that out.
I edited it too. So.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's see what Stump has to ask. He asks, for the big three / Holy Trinity, also known as Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman. It's debatable if that's the Holy Trinity. But
no, it's not.
Isn't it?
No.
Oh. I was trying to...
If you're talking to my dad.
Yeah, that's... What stories would you suggest to read to get a good baseline for each character to build off of?
Well, I know what you're going to suggest for at least one of them.
That's right. Superman for All Seasons, baby.
It's so catchy.
It is.
I really like that bit.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked about it before, but for those who may or may not have listened to those episodes / may or may not have been allowed to listen to those episodes, what is it about Superman for All Seasons that makes it like an iconic Superman story for you?
For me, it acts almost like what's the best way I can explain this? It feels almost like a bottle episode in some ways of a TV show,
right?
But it's not as insular as that. But you're basically you're walking into the going, I know that there's this guy Superman.
Sure.
I know that he's from Smallville. But does he remember that? And so it's basically him coming home and like looking back at his life, right, and his existence and where he fits in as part of the human race, as part of a member of the Kent family, as a member of society in general, as an American. I mean, you really get an idea of who Superman is from the ground up, which is sort of the best way, I think, from the artwork to the narrative. It feels very like homegrown and almost melancholy, but like in a really great kind of way. It's like a sort of like it's like you're going to like a bonfire in a farm or something like that, and you just feel like comforted. And I think for me that it's a good way to understand where Superman came from, but also what drives him, because it's very easy to
it's
read.
a lot less about his powers,
yes,
like what he can do, and more about like what makes him such a good guy. Where does he get that from? Who raised him? You know, what made him into Superman beyond,
and how does that connect
physically
to the decisions that he makes? Which I think is a really great thing to see first, because it's hard to find a lot of Superman comic books that don't have these giant fights, and it's all surrounded around that. This builds you up and gets you ready for that, to understand the thing that makes Superman good is if you understand how he is grounded. Because if there's nothing like tethering him to Earth, then he's just this overpowered alien that could destroy everything. If you don't understand why he makes the decisions that he does, then
it's the thing that makes him relatable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's Superman for All Seasons is a trait to not be without. You have to understand what you're getting into when you're reading it. It's really this sort of down home sort of book.
Yeah. Well, and when it originally came out as 4 issues, and each issue was a season.
Yep.
But now it's collected as a trade as well, so you can just get the whole story in one shebang. For Superman, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the question is what's the best stories, just like to get into them, right?
Yeah, or like a baseline to understand who the character is and how to build off of them, right?
I think Superman Birthright is interesting. There's a lot of things that will be familiar to maybe people that have seen movies and stuff like that too. Like Superman Birthright is sort of like it's where certain ideas about the Kryptonian heritage, like about where the S comes from and stuff like that. Like that's in that book. And it's about him kind of finding his place as well. It's a little less introspective than Superman for All Seasons. It's a bit closer to what you might call like a more typical comic book story. But I'd say Superman Birthright is up there too. You know, or even the 6-issue Man of Steel from like the 80s, like right after Crisis on Infinite Earths. There was a 6-issue thing called the Man of Steel, and it's a Superman story that basically gets you sort of primed for what's going to happen post Crisis, like for what his origin is and who he is and stuff like that. And then the flip side of that is there's a single issue of Alan Moore Superman called Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And that's sort of like saying goodbye to pre-Crisis Superman. It's kind of like a look back, a bit of a flashback of the Superman basically from his debut through to the 80s. You know, the kind of Superman that was so powerful he could like just drag a bunch of planets through a galaxy or something like that. So I'd also recommend that.
I'd say grab, I think either Birthright or Superman for All Seasons, and then maybe grab the recent
or
collection.
All-Star Superman.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, you know what? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. Superman's been around for 80 years, almost 81 now. Lots of people have takes on Superman, and there's lots of books that are sort of like, they're like retrospectives. They're like, what's the best of Superman? But Birthright, Superman for All Seasons, All-Star Superman,
and the Action Comics 1000, I think is a great book just to get little bites of the types of stories that you could get, because
there's a bunch of different sort of angles to that's true.
So for me, I think there's a ton of big great books that kind of gives you an idea who the character is. I think if you want an understanding of who they are from the beginning. Birthright, Superman for All Seasons is great, and then grab maybe something like the Action Comics, I think 1000, which is I think that'll give you sort of the different types of stories, and then you can kind of grab those authors, those artists, and see if you like other things that they've done. Because I think that's the best way, because at the end of the day, you don't know what type of it's not just about the character, it's about the writers and the artists, because you don't necessarily know, like the first book you might grab you may not enjoy, but that doesn't mean that character you don't actually enjoy. And there's not a story that you might not enjoy from them, because I don't like all Superman stories. I think for me, I prefer a grounded Superman, but that doesn't mean that that's for everybody. So
no, that's fair too. That's a good point.
What about Wonder Woman?
Yeah. Do you know what? Wonder Woman has been around a long time. It shouldn't be as tricky as it is to pull out Wonder Woman stories, but there's actually a lot fewer sort of Elseworld things that center on Wonder. You know, like a lot of these Superman stories are vaguely or not at all in continuity, right? The ones that we mentioned.
Which makes it
I'm
easy,
sure we will mention for Batman. But Wonder Woman doesn't have as many of those. So now you're looking at, you know, like what was actually happening in Wonder Woman comics and things like that. One thing that I'll suggest in general, but I think specifically for Wonder Woman because it's important, is sometimes you can find DC collects these, like they call them like Golden Age omnibuses. And basically it's like they'll just take decolorized versions of all of these old comic books from like the 40s and whatnot, and put them in one big kind of like tome, like a big bound book. And it's nothing it's like printed on newsprint. It's like, it's not a fancy book at all, but you can basically you can read like 10 years of, of a character like that. Like they've done them for a few different things. I'd say any sort of collected edition thing like that for Wonder Woman is interesting, because that Golden Age Wonder Woman from way back, it's easy to look back now and it seems kind of silly, but it was really important and it was doing new things. And most of what's in there is still basically true for Wonder Woman. You know, little things are tweaked and changed, but you know, she's an Amazon. She's, you know, gets her powers from the gods in some manner. You know, she was made of clay and then given life, and sometimes she's literally the daughter of Zeus. But either way, like that stuff's all in there. Steve Trevor is in there. You know, the idea of, you know, like the bracelets, the lasso of truth, all of that stuff starts right away. By the same token, I think anytime they sort of like relaunch or reset something, you tend to get a pretty good new Wonder Woman story that sort of reestablishes her, or is that like that new writer's take on who she is and what it means. Brian Azzarello's run on Wonder Woman in the New 52 is great. I recommend that, like his entire run in the New 52.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't go all the way to issue 52. It goes to 30 something. But it's that one is very, very focused about like her place among the Olympians. Like it's very like Greek mythology heavy.
That's really cool.
It's really cool. And she becomes the god of war in that one. And then, you know, Wonder Woman is meant to be like an emissary of peace. So there's a lot about like, how do I function as the god of war while also like not believing in it? Like, or not. I mean, she fights, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then at the start of the Rebirth era, Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman art is kind of interesting because each issue flipped between two different stories. So there was one that was like Wonder Woman like year one, and the other one was called like The Truth and the Lies. So there was stuff happening in the present that related to like her origin, and kept like each issue was in one story or the other. Yeah. So that was kind of neat too. There's a good Elseworlds one though called Wonder Woman Odyssey. That's pretty neat. It's got kind of like a early 2000s, like The Matrix just came out sort of vibe, but it's pretty good. And actually, to my knowledge, that is the earliest Wonder Woman comic I read.
Really?
I just, like Wonder Woman was in Justice League comics and things that I read, but that's probably the first just Wonder Woman story I read was Odyssey. So I'd probably give that one a go. Yeah.
And then Batman.
I mean, like Superman, there's tons.
Year one, I think, is...
Year one is pretty good. That's a pretty good intro to Batman, I would say. Yeah, I mean, God, there's so many versions of his, like, people have their takes on his origins and stuff like that. I'd also recommend, in the way that you did with Action Comics 1000.
Yeah.
I mean, Detective Comics 1000 is coming out later this year. I assume it will be pretty good. But in the New 52, the Detective Comics number 27, which in the 40s was the issue where Batman debuted, in the New 52, when they reached number 27, it was also the 75th anniversary of Batman. So they did a big anniversary issue. Again, the same idea with like different types of stories and like a reinvention of the very first Batman story and stuff like that. That's a cool issue to pick up. That's a neat one. If I had to pick one of those sort of graphic novel or like Elseworlds ones, do you know what? It's not an Elseworld, but I'd pick Under the Red Hood. You're diving midway into like Batman's history because it's about the second Robin and all of these kind of things. There's like a lot of players and characters you're meant to know already. But if you want to learn who Batman is, why not jump into what is maybe like the defining failure of his career?
That's really interesting.
It's a story about his greatest failure, which is letting a sidekick, die. And,
wow, yeah.
And then when that Robin comes back, he takes up like the original mantle of the Joker, who used to be the Red Hood. So it's like all these things that haunt Batman. You kind of get in Batman's head a little bit. Like how does the guilt play in? Because that's obviously a big part of it. His parents are gone and he's made this vow and he's almost Batman because he's just like, I made a promise. I have to do it.
Can't not be Batman. Yeah.
So I would almost recommend Under the Red Hood as a good like intro Batman story.
I think that, I mean, this kind of ties into the next question. So I'm just going to move right into it.
Sure.
Because I think it's a similar question, but in a slightly different way.
Okay.
From Joe Loria. Which is what's the best place to start to introduce yourself into the Batman universe? So I think it's a little bit different because you're not just talking about like where Batman starts, but specifically that universe.
Right. Yeah. So the difference is instead of necessarily just getting into like what makes the character tick, if you're actually trying to find a way into Batman continuity.
Yeah.
There's a couple of spots that make sense. This one, I'll probably say it a lot this episode, but the New 52, for most things, if you're going to pick a starting point, this was a big, like, we finished
restart,
the old stuff. Here's the new stuff. So there is, whether or not you end up loving all of it or whatever, the New 52 is a pretty good demarcation line. And in the case of Batman, that comic book, the Batman comic book, was fantastic. That was the Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo run. They introduced the Court of Owls, which is a brand new sort of like group of villains to Batman. They do a great big origin arc called 0 Year that takes him from Bruce Wayne to Batman and then beyond. There's a couple of
like actually Batman Beyond. Or?
No.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just mean like just the word beyond, lowercase b.
No, okay.
There's a couple of great Joker stories in there. It's. I would very heartily suggest the New 52 Batman run. And it's pretty self-contained. Like the Court of Owls are still a thing. They're out there, but like you can basically read that run and that's it.
Yeah.
Or, Batman Eternal is a book that deliberately like throws all like 75 years of Batman into a story, all sorts of minor villain appearances and stories about, how they're connected and things like that. It's a 52 issue series. It came out weekly and it's collected in 2, I think, big volumes. But Batman Eternal is a very good story. Maybe a little more on the dense side, but it's basically, you're going to get a crash course in Batman history because you're going to see every villain, a lot of supporting characters. You're diving headfirst in that way.
It's true. I think, I mean, this question doesn't specifically say read, so I will.
That's true too.
So I think that an option might be watch the Batman the Animated Series.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's a little slower than maybe what you might if you're newer to comic books and you're modern cartoons and things like that.
Sure,
it's going to be a little slower, but
a bit more like dramatic.
Yes,
they're more like radio plays.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a great way to understand the universe and get it all in a few seasons.
Yeah.
Also, the Batman Beyond series actually does a lot to talk about Batman's history, but also modernizes a lot of these characters in a way that I don't necessarily love in a lot of the other newer Batman cartoons. Yeah. Batman Beyond does a really great job of sort of taking that specific narrative and updating it a bit. So
definitely. Well, and that Batman animated series contributed to a lot of things that are in the comics now. Mr. Freeze's origin as we know it now started on that show. Harley Quinn as a character started on that show. There's a few things that sort of began there. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. Definitely watch that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go to the next question.
Sure.
Coming from Brandon Flick, who asks, "What's a good way to find or read older runs and books?" Random example. I've been trying to reread HERO.
Yeah.
Hero by Will Pfeiffer. And I can't find any trades for it. Is digital the only way to go? Nothing on instocktrades.com. Can't find anything in local stores.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Hero, that was a version of Dial H for Hero.
That's right.
That was out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So modern comics, basically anytime an issue comes out, it also comes out digitally. That's just how they are now. But then there's also an effort by all companies to go back and sort of digitize
all
stuff
of the older
from
runs,
before that era. And there are obviously things that get prioritized, some key issues or major moments or things like that get in there first. And also it's prioritized by character too. You'll notice there's a lot more Batman and Superman, back issue stuff that's digitized than
Ragman.
Well, I mean, there's a lot more to work with too, but yes, as an example, or there's a lot more of them than there is Green Arrow, or you're gonna have a harder time finding original Dr. Fate stories than you are Wonder Woman and stuff like that.
Totally.
By the time you get down the list to Hero, you may not have a ton of luck.
Yeah.
Yet, these things do get digitized eventually. They all will. In the meantime, when you're looking for stuff to actually read, some of the stuff that Brandon mentioned are, there are comic book stores, but then you can also, if you're not sure if there's a trade or something, go to bookstores, go to used bookstores. Sometimes, people are either forced to or voluntarily kind of clean out their prized possessions, or they're moving or whatever. Sometimes a used bookstore ends up with stuff. And on the business end of it, sometimes used bookstores don't know what they've got.
It's true.
Because
even nowadays,
because comic books are not the focus of a store like that.
No.
It's dealing way more with things that maybe people would
like. Paperback and hardcover is not comic books. Yeah,
exactly. So I found a bunch of issues of that Vertigo Madame Xanadu. And
that's right.
I bought them for $2 because so if you do happen to find things in a used bookstore, odds are you'll probably get more for your money.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes do a little quick glance either at Amazon or even things like eBay. I mean, you have to decide how important something is to you. Do you want to bid money on it? Do you want to be worrying about an online auction? But at the very least, it'll give you a sense of how many of them are out there or how willing people are to hang on to them. You know, if you go to eBay and then you type something in and then you see like a bunch of listings and like the opening bid is really low on all of them, then there's a good shot that that people are just getting rid of them. You know, you're not going to end up in a bidding war because it's some sort of iconic issue or something like that.
Yeah.
I do check those things out a lot, but yeah, to be honest with that particular series, you might not have a ton of luck if you've already checked in-stock trades, if you've already, done some of that stuff. You can always try like Amazon, or you can flip the script a little bit and see if there's maybe a collected edition of Will Pfeiffer comics, or every once in a while there's something like that, those sort of omnibus things. But yeah, in that particular case, it might be more about just getting kind of lucky. You know what you can also do if you're really gung-ho, if you decide it's very important to you and you want those issues and they're not digital yet, so you can just start calling comic book shops, and even if they don't have them, just say, if you ever see them, let me know, because I'm interested. Most people will be very helpful with you that way. You can also do that, because again, if depending on the series or the comic or whatever, it's not, if you're willing to spend a little bit, you can maybe build your collection slowly over time. Unfortunately, this answer is not a good immediate fix of like, I want to read this tomorrow. What can I do?
There's a lot of online communities too.
Yes. Yeah. There's forums, Reddit, obviously. If you go to like our comic books or our DC comics, or depending on the character you're into, they might have their own
subreddit
kind of community as well. Yeah. It never hurts to just post in there. Sometimes they'll post like reading orders and lists and stuff like that, or resources. You may at least find someone who is like, wow, no one else talks about Hero. I actually have some. Do you want them?
It's true.
You could get lucky.
You never know, right? So
yeah.
I think like that's one of the best things about being into comic books is the community aspect. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why we did this podcast, and why I think that it's had any success at all is because of community.
Yeah, definitely.
So I mean, they're out there, and there's good sides and bad sides to every community, but I think it's easy to find the people that are good.
And I've got to say, generally speaking, overwhelmingly, our comic books has been a very positive.
r/comic
books has been a very sort of positive community. So has r/DC Comics, but I'm just always sort of impressed with the r/comic books one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brandon has a second part of this question, which is follow up in the same vein. Is there a good resource for checking out a creator's work in comics, like an IMDb, but for writers or artists? And absolutely there is.
Yeah, it's not like a specific IMDb thing, but you can go to the wiki.
Well, also DC has an amazing,
yes, yeah.
Like if you go to the DC's actual website, you can basically look up any artist, and they'll have a little write up for the artist, and then every single book that they've been a part of.
Yeah, I think between that and like the wiki, like the DC wiki or the Marvel wiki or whatever you're into, sometimes it's about like you start on, in the way that you do with like full Wikipedia, you start on like, oh, I like this issue, and you go, who wrote it? And then you can click on that, and then it'll give you a list of what they wrote, and you go like, oh, or what characters are they famous for? And you click on that, you can end up sort of down the rabbit hole of like clicking links.
As a little hint, I had to do that for an upcoming guest of ours. Well, I started doing that for an upcoming guest we might be having soon, and it was cool to see like all the connections and how like it's very like kept up.
Yeah,
all of this online documentation. So
yeah, I don't really go to the Marvel website all that much because it's not like in my sort of sphere. So I'm sure they probably have a similar sort of resource as the DC one, like their own kind of archive.
This is Dr. DC though, so
of things. But yeah, this is Dr. DC, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. But I would definitely, I'm trying not to just make my answer Google it. But go to the wiki.
Yeah.
Because that way, even if you're not 100% sure what their name is, or maybe who wrote something, but you like, oh, the art was really cool in that one. Then you see who the artist was, or who the color, like they'll break it down, like who was the inker, who was the penciler, who was the colorist. Like you can really if you want to, start to develop a very particular like fandom for someone. Like, I love how this person letters comics. Like, you could just follow a letterer and be like, I'm into it.
I've got a particular fandom for the comic books. One that makes me like inkers. That sounds like an inappropriate comment, but no.
It does. And I'm so...
he's one of those inkers.
Yeah. The inker.
Ooh. Dial. Okay.
Oh, no. I shouldn't be giving away all these great ideas.
That legitimately is a great one. Well, next question comes from Raspberries Reviews, the kind you find on a secondhand podcast. Raz asks, okay, even though you know I am a comic book reader, I do want to ask something. I have been wanting to get into Suicide Squad comics, but I'm not sure if I want to start with the New 52 or Rebirth. Which would you recommend? I would recommend not watching the movie. I think that's a great place to start.
Well, I'm just assuming we're talking about the Suicide Squad that's made up of villains who are forced to go on missions.
As opposed to
the original Suicide Squad, which was just like, it's like a bunch of army guys.
Oh. Still DC?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was like very earlier on. And then in the 80s got reinvented by John Ostrander as this sort of like, you know, these villains are sort of press ganged into work, like black ops work for the government, and the government will deny that they exist if they're caught or anything like that. That's where we got the modern version of it. So in that modern version, I would totally recommend reading that original like Ostrander run. It's great.
Really?
There's some really good character stuff. Like, I feel like that's the era where they're like, we should really start exploring these characters psychologically. There's a whole great thing about, you know, Count Vertigo, who is sort of depressed, and he makes this sort of pact with Deadshot that like he wants Deadshot to end his life. And Deadshot is like, if you tell me to do this, I will do it. Make sure that this is what you want. Like, there's really interesting stuff between them. In terms of more modern stuff, the New 52 Suicide Squad is okay. The Rebirth one is good. I like the Rebirth one. I would skip there's a series called New Suicide Squad that I think could have been really neat, but it never found its footing, and it got kind of bogged down with characters that people don't like Joker's daughter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The New 52 one is just interesting because that's the one where Harley becomes part of the team. You know, she wasn't always. That's actually relatively recent development for her character.
Oh, wow.
But so like that's a pretty cool one. But I would say definitely the Rebirth era. I think that's the one that maybe feels the most like that 80s one. And it's pretty neat. I would do that one.
All right. The next question comes from Talking Superman. I said that as if we had a song.
We still don't have a drop.
No.
This is not the first time we've talked about this.
Yes, I know.
We've talked Superman about this.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Talk my super.
No.
Never mind. Doesn't work.
She talks. Ooh, baby, Superman. I don't know.
Of all the songs.
I don't know why.
Of all the songs.
Talking. Superman.
I mean, I was never going to be ready for that.
Nope. I don't know. I don't think I was either, to be honest. Talking Superman asks, I have an honest question.
No.
Moving on. I have an honest question. Do you find that a chunk of your audience whom seek out a DC podcast are really new to comics?
This is a fair question. That we're doing this episode about like intro to comics, but it's like, of the people that choose to listen to a DC Comics podcast, how many of them are not familiar already?
And I think that the intent is that we want to get more. I mean, the intent behind this entire podcast is to get people more aware of DC canon and the history, and learn more about these characters in depth, whether they're new or.
I will say anecdotally, I've gotten a decent number of messages from listeners who I would maybe call like lapsed fans, people who were like, oh, I watched the cartoon when I was a kid and I never read but I never got into the comics. Or they say like, oh, I used to read Superman all the time and I don't know where to jump in again. Or there's lots of that. Or we also, the other sort of sub genre of that is we get people like you said, Richard, who are like, I'm really into this. My partner isn't. What can I do to get them into this? Like those kind of questions. So even if our specific listeners aren't completely like neophytes to comic books, I do feel like there's a big chunk of our listenership that are not like huge consumers of the material, or they're just people with like a passing interest and they maybe listen in on episode topics that they find interesting. Like they go like, oh, okay, you know, we're going to do secret identities. That's a neat one. I'll listen in there. I think those are pretty decent actually chunks of our listenership.
I think
that's anecdotal. I don't have stats.
I mean, I do, but, oops. I think
your stats are weirdly specific. They say like what room of the house they're in.
Well,
how do you even have that?
I mean, that's just for one specific.
It's just for Josh.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, I hope that this also acts as a way, if you are a person who listens to comics, to give this episode maybe to somebody. And one, maybe they'll get into this podcast. But two,
buy some merch.
Oh, yeah.
Buy some merch.
And if you're
DrDCpodcast.com or .ca. And
Dashiell, grab your dad's credit card, buy some merch.
Dave, turn off the podcast.
Yeah, Dave. But I think that we do. I think our most vocal group, it tends to be comic book listeners. Yeah. Though I wish that we could.
I think even of our most vocal group. I mean, like we just had Josh on our 100th. Even of our most vocal fans and listeners.
Vocal.
Oh my God. I like that. Even of them, I feel like there's the sense that like, I mean, it's even true for me. I can't know everything.
No.
So I think, I do think there are people that even they might know a lot about one thing. They might know a lot about everything, but hopefully, eventually, just by like statistically, we'll get to a topic where they maybe feel a little out of their depth, and that'll be interesting. So it's still always a goal, but I mean, I guess you're right. That's true. Most people have some sort of interest in comics anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, hopefully this is a gateway for them, right?
Yeah, totally.
This is the type of gate that we want in comics.
We can always grow and learn more.
That's right. That's why we try to, I think, expand our diversity and vision throughout this podcast by bringing in
more white people.
Yeah.
More white.
Oh God, no.
Sorry. Right, keep it together.
101.
Keep it together.
Well, with that, the Dr. DC podcast will be back after this quick break. This episode of the Dr. DC podcast is brought to you thanks to our sponsor, Great Lakes Grooming Co. Honestly, I've been using this product actually for a really, really long time. I, as well, have a very large beard, same as the doctor. I think mine actually might be a little bit bigger. So my favorite products are, first of all, that beard oil. I've been using it for a really long time. I've actually not had to use cologne because of it. I actually stopped using cologne because it was just, that smell of that beard oil is amazing. I also have a very rough and dry beard usually, so this has been making it super smooth. And then I have to say that my second favorite product is that Noble Selves hair styling cream. It's a medium light holding, which is really nice. It's hard to find a good holding cream for your hair. I've used waxes and gels and sprays and all that stuff, and it never really works. This stuff makes my hair look amazing. It holds for multiple days on end for people like me who don't like to shower. It's honestly a great product. So I've been super happy with it so far. I think you guys will be too. Great Lakes Grooming is meant to be easy and ready to use, rain or shine. All their products are purposely designed and environmentally responsible, handmade in Canada, ready for adventure wherever one may find themselves. And lucky for you listeners, you get 10% off on the of Great Lakes Grooming's regular price products by going to www.greatlakesgrooming.com and using the promo code DRDC podcast. That's right. www.greatlakesgrooming.com, promo code Dr. DC podcast. Now, back to the show. And we're back.
Hey.
Oh, hip hop hooray. Oh, hey.
A little quieter.
Oh,
Hip hop hooray. Oh yeah, I told you that's what we sometimes call my my infant daughter the weakest ghost.
oh yes.
Sometimes she's just sitting in the corner. She'll just go.
The funniest thing ever.
The weakest ghost.
Come over here, I'm gonna scare you. You spooked yet? I'm gonna knock over this plate. No. Oh, too heavy. Oh, well, let's head on over to emails.
Checking the email.
I'm
Hope
glad.
it's from a fun listener.
I was gonna say a new listener. Check the email. Hope it's from someone who hasn't read a lot of comic books but is interested in learning more.
That rolls off the tongue.
Rolls right off the tongue.
I think that should stay. That's the new drop.
Yeah, I can't. How could you argue with?
I'm locking it in.
You've got that power.
I've turned the key.
You know, it requires both of us.
No.
We're having a celebrity resident this time.
Is this like the last time we had a celebrity resident?
Slightly.
Okay.
Apparently, Burt Reynolds is asking a question.
Yeah, that's right. I saw this one. Yeah. I won't remind people that they can submit fake names and emails when they send us questions.
Except for what you just did right then. Pardon?
What does Cannonball Run ask?
I that's not the one I would normally go to.
What, Gator?
Yeah, I would go to what's the truck driving movie?
Is that not Cannonball Run?
No,
No, that's not.
No, it's Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, Smokey and the Bandit.
I'm like, Cannonball Run.
Or
is
what
that-
about what's the Gridiron?
Deliverance?
No, what's the one where they're like the prison guys that play football?
Oh,
And then
the one with Adam Sandler.
Well, no, Adam Sandler did the remake.
Yeah.
Longest Yard, is that it?
Sure. I think this is not this podcast.
This is not the Dr. Burt Reynolds podcast.
But it could be.
I don't know that it could. I don't know nearly enough.
I'm sorry. My dog is crying.
It sounds like the weakest ghost.
Yeah, it does. Burt Reynolds asks, what is canon? Who decides what stories count? And how do you know? This is literally the hardest question you could ask.
You could not ask a harder question. So let's go through it piece by piece. What is canon? What does that mean when people say canon?
Well, generally, it's a thing that you put inside of an explosive device. And
You put a cannon inside an explosive device?
no, that's a cannonball, and then you run. Cannonball.
You should know that, Bert.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yes, I should.
Is that Burt Reynolds doing Will Smith?
Miami. Here comes the Men in Black. Galaxy Defenders.
It's funny because I'm in Miami.
Are you doing Norm Macdonald?
Yeah. It's a big hat. Right. So what is canon? So when people talk about things being canonical or being canon, they're talking about like essentially what stories count. Because comic books have been obviously around for quite a long time. And lots of different people write them. It's not just like one person's story. There's lots of people writing stories concurrently too. That there are Superman stories happening in Action Comics and Superman stories happening in Superman comics. And then he's also over here in the Justice League and over here with the Legion and wherever else. It's no matter how careful you are, and for a very long time, they weren't careful at all, but no matter how careful you are, at some point, someone's going to write something that contradicts something else that happened, or kind of messes up the order of events, especially if you do sort of flashback things or revisiting an origin, or, or one writer says, we don't need this character anymore, and they write them out, or they kill them or something, and someone else says, no, like they were a great character. We'll find a way to bring them back. And those kind of things end up causing some issues. So then every once in a while they do what's called a retcon. It's called retroactive continuity. It's where you decide later on that this is how something previously transpired. So for example, in the very, very early era, for the first quite a bit of Detective Comics and Batman comics, when Batman was just starting, he didn't have a butler. And then I forget what the issue is, but let's just say Detective Comics 30 something. Yeah. Alfred shows up and says, Master Wayne, I've been here the whole time. That's a retcon, because you've never seen him before, but he said, I have been there. They decided it later, and it applies moving backwards. So the idea of canon then is that over, 80 years, there's a lot of stuff that now no longer makes sense, or is contradicted, or doesn't fit the timeline, or is just irrelevant. So there is a certain degree of like, some stories you can read them and they're a ton of fun, but if you're looking for where's the reference to that in a modern Batman comic, you won't find it because it doesn't count. It's quote unquote not canon.
Yeah.
That's what canon means, because these are serialized stories. We're still following these characters. But there needs to be some sort of sense, however strict or loose, of what is fair game. What do I need to keep track of?
Not that,
or not even need to keep track of, but like what counts?
Not that DC is exceptional at this, but
no one is the thing though, right? That also then applies, sometimes a writer has a really good idea. There's a story that we really like called Superman Red Sun.
Yeah.
And it's about what if Superman crash landed in like Soviet Czechoslovakia, Soviet Ukraine instead of Kansas, and he's raised Soviet. It's an interesting idea for a story. But if you were trying to shoehorn that into like the main Superman continuity, his main narrative, there's no place for it. It doesn't fit. It would never work. So it's not canon, right? Canon is Superman grew up in Smallville and moved to Metropolis. Over here is this else world, just someone else's cool idea, but it's not canon.
Exactly.
That's what that means. So there's comic book canon, obviously, and then there's there's movie canon, like the Superman of the DCEU is different from the Christopher Reeve one. Those are separate canons of Superman.
So is there a way to know?
I mean, yes. And the way to know is basically if you're reading something and keeping up with it and they reference something that happened, it must then be canon.
If it exists, it's canon?
So here's an example. Bunch of different stuff happens in DC, including like Final Crisis, where Batman gets seemingly killed by Darkseid, but he's really sent back in time and he ends up having to fight his way back to the present. And then in the meantime, Blackest Night happens, where a bunch of black rings reanimate like the dead of the DC universe. And then New 52, we're starting all over. Everything came before, so Blackest Night, Final Crisis, all that stuff, we're starting all over. And then there are very specific issues in that New 52 Batman run that make reference to Batman having to fight his way back to the present. So for a while in the New 52, people weren't exactly sure what was canon anymore. What counts? Because this is a brand new start. So then as you're reading, you say, well, Scott Snyder says that he had to fight his way through time. So in some form or another, Final Crisis must be canon. Not necessarily every single line of dialogue, like the history of the world is different.
But some of the key.
But some key moment, like that must have happened because it's being referenced.
So you basically just have to keep reading to figure it out. Unless it's called Elseworlds book or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that you can very clearly just put off to the side, anything Earth 1, those books are meant to sort of be contained. They're not even necessarily supposed to be in the same world as each other.
Yeah.
Superman Earth 1 isn't necessarily even on the same continuity as Green Lantern Earth 1.
Yeah.
They're just meant to be something to be read kind of on their own. The approach that is, you kind of have to train yourself a little bit, but it's to be kind of fluid, right? It's the idea that like there are things that are big, like broad strokes, and then there are very, very fine points. The fine points are the most likely to change. What are the exact words someone said to someone else? What's the exact like sequence of events or fights? But what are the big things are less likely to change. Batman is killed and sent back in time, or, Superman dies and returns to life, or, Bane breaks Batman's back, or Wonder Woman leaves the island. There are different versions of her leaving the island. Sometimes it's voluntary. Sometimes she's expelled. Sometimes she can find it again. Sometimes she can't. But that broad stroke of she's from an island, she leaves is always there.
It's true.
So there's a little bit of just being fluid. And really the only way to know what is currently canon is context. And then in terms of the publishing, any sort of the books that are coming out in DC are in the current continuity. And they're usually pretty explicit when they aren't. So they'll be called Earth 1 or something, or they'll have some sort of other title, or they'll make them part of a different imprint, like Black Label or something like that. And then you'll just you'll know slightly intuitively, these don't really count. But unfortunately, there's not like a canon, like a checklist or anything like that. It's a little bit more intuitive than that. Or you just sort of have to feel it out a little bit. But
absolutely.
Yeah. That's a super tough question.
I know. I figured it would be. The next question I love comes from Lauren, who asks, what are the best female superhero titles, like ones where they are the focus?
Well, obviously Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Let's just get that out there right now. And specifically Wonder Woman, like I said, that Brian Azzarello run in the New 52, and also the Rebirth Wonder Woman has been very, very, very good. Those are the most recent as well, but they just also happen to be great comics. I would say
Starfire is really good.
Starfire is very good, but she only got her, or I guess technically, second solo series relatively recently.
Like 2011, I think.
A little bit later, but yeah, it's like in the 20-teens. But it's pretty fun. That's it's got art by Amanda Connor. And that's sort of like Starfire just like trying to fit in, like in a normal life. And that's a fun one. Black Canary has had a few different series. I think her first one is like 4 issues. It's called like New Wings or something like that. And it's pretty good. And then there was a Black Canary series during like, just before Rebirth. And that's 12 issues. And it's great, where she's like also famous as Black Canary, which is her stage name. She's like a rock star that tours, and then there's all this superheroing that sort of happens adjacent to that. That's a really, really cool series. Books with female leads, you have to mention Birds of Prey. Yeah. Which is, it's sort of a rotating roster, but it includes Oracle, who is Barbara Gordon, previously Batgirl, then crippled by the Joker. She becomes Oracle. She's sort of like an information broker for superheroes. Black Canary is in there. Other sort of main/major cast members include the Huntress, Helena Bertinelli. It includes Lady Blackhawk. It includes, like Catwoman's been in there. Hawk and Dove have been in there. Poison Ivy in the New 52, I think, was briefly a member of the Birds of Prey. If you're talking about comics with female leads where they're the focus, you have to throw that in there, and you have to throw in Gotham City Sirens, which is Catwoman, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy, like as roommates in Gotham. and it's great. Yeah. That's a really, really good series too.
You can't talk about female DC characters without bringing up Zatanna.
Of course.
I think Zatanna's got
surprisingly few like solo series from Zatanna, but there are some stories that are Zatanna heavy. There's an arc called Crisis of Conscience, which is tied to Identity Crisis. She does have a couple of like mini series. And then she was also like the leader of the Justice League Dark in the New 52, and then she's also in the Justice League Dark in the Rebirth era as well. So those are good ones for finding Zatanna. Supergirl, definitely. Yeah, I mean, and there are lots of Batgirl comics and Batwoman. Kate Kane had a series, I think, that started in 2006 that was really, really good, and then the New 52 one was great. Yeah, I mean, it's not as hard to find as you think it is, and I think also because there's a push to be more inclusive and have more diversity. I think there's a certain level of effort that's a bit higher, at least in modern comics, with female-led comic books than just, we're going to write another, like, Guy Gardner comic. You just do whatever you want. If you're writing a female character, I think you try to do something slightly more interesting.
Absolutely. All right, you want to move on?
Yeah.
Next question comes from Brian. Oh, Brian. Brian.
I shall release Brian.
Brian asks, what are the comic book stories that the movies are based on? Ooh. I want to read comic versions of movies I like to start with.
Ooh, that's very interesting.
Because Nolan took some, we talked about it already, but the Bane breaking Batman's back, that was...
Sure. So, The Dark Knight takes a lot of cues from a book called The Long Halloween. It's not like a one-for-one adaptation by any stretch, but some ideas about, Two-Face's origin, some stuff about the Joker. There are some pretty key elements in there that are in a book called The Long Halloween, which is Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I would say, in terms of how the Joker views his own origin in that's pretty much taken from The Killing Joke. The idea that he sort of makes it up or makes it multiple choice that's different every time. Like Richard mentioned, in The Dark Knight Rises, there's a couple of different stories that are sort of influencing that. One very obvious one is called No Man's Land, which is a storyline where Gotham City is basically cut off from the rest of the country and becomes like a no man's land war zone. That's a very clear thing that's built into The Dark Knight Rises. But then, even down to, how do they treat Bane? What does Bane do? And he breaks Batman's back. And, that's a very particular moment in comics. And that comes from a story called Nightfall, from the 90s. I talked about Superman Birthright earlier. That's a big, big influence on Man of Steel. Batman v Superman. Again, none of these are one-to-one adaptations, but Batman v Superman takes a ton of visual cues and stuff about the character, and how the characters sort of relate to each other or how they feel about each other. That's taken directly from The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. Suicide Squad is not especially based on anything particular other than just characters from Suicide Squad. Justice League, the idea that the invaders are from Apocalypse, that's an idea that's sort of sown in Justice League Origin, which is the first arc of the New 52 Justice League. And it's obviously drawing on ideas of the New Gods and things like that, which are long-standing comic book things. But again, the story itself is, if you had to pick a comic book, it's probably closest to Justice League Origin. Aquaman borrows a lot from a story called Throne of Atlantis which happened during the New 52. God. The Mr. Freeze portions of Batman and Robin are like very poor adaptations of the Heart of Ice episode from Batman the Animated Series. Yeah, I mean, there's not always like a direct sort of thing in there. But yeah, I mean, those are the big ones I'd say. The Constantine film is loosely based on an arc called Dangerous Habits that happened in Hellblazer comics. Yeah. I mean, I think those are those are the big ones that have maybe the most readily available like comic book source material. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I like that. I mean, the upcoming Shazam movie, I can only assume is based more heavily on the New 52 Shazam origin than any other sort of previous Shazam or Captain Marvel material. That's it looks very much like it's following the beats of that Shazam backup story that was happening in the New 52 Justice League.
I love how the Aquaman movie literally was just like the visual telling of the story that he never got to finish.
The stuff with the Seven Seas, yeah, it's true.
So cool.
Well, and you'll find that the other way too. So I already said like one inspiration was not even a comic book; it was a cartoon.
Yeah,
you'll find it happens the other way too. There's a whole run of Action Comics where I think Richard Donner also co-wrote them that are very clearly inspired by his Superman 2. Like where the movie then inspired something in the comics. So it kind of goes both ways, actually, and then the Lego Batman movie sort of takes what a comic book Bane looks like and then gave him the coat and gave him the voice. So now, and even Bane in the comics now wears that coat. So like now there's like a weird hybrid of like the sort of like Latino luchador kind of Bane and this sort of like, oh, brother, kind of like version of him. So it does it doesn't only go one direction. Like the movies have a huge influence the other way around.
It's true,
you know? It's kind of fun to see that too.
Well, especially with how popular they are, right? I mean, how could they not? Next question I love, because it's something that I struggle with, and I'm sure that you do as well, being on a fixed budget sometimes.
Yes.
How do you decide what to read? Because there's so much out there. What do you look for? This is from Piper G.
Yeah. Well, the important context is that where we live, I have a slightly different situation from
we're a week late.
Most people. We're a week late, but also we live in a relatively small town and pretty remote. So it's expensive to get things here. So my comic book shop doesn't just have like single issues of comics on a shelf for you to just go in and be like, oh, I'll give this a try and then take it. I actually have to say what I want to read and then they bring it in. So I kind of have to commit in advance, which is fine for me because I know what I'm doing and I know what I like. But it would make it harder to sort of jump in. Most comic book shops in most places in like Canada and the US that aren't like super remote like that, they'll have their subscribers, people who are like, I want these. And when they come in, they go in their bin and like no one can touch them. Like they'll be there for them to pick up. But they'll also just get extras. So they'll usually have like a sort of rack of a few shelves that will have the new issues of Marvel and DC and Valiant and Image or whatever.
Totally.
And so when I lived places that had that, and when I was starting to get back into comic books again, there were things that I knew that I liked. I basically always picked up The Flash. I always picked up Aquaman. I always picked up Batman, basically. Those three I could always count on. Everything else, sometimes it was like, oh, that cover seems interesting. Let's give that a go. And I'd read it and maybe I'd like it. And then I would keep getting it. And then if I really liked it, I'd like add it to my list. Like definitely bring this in for me. Or I wouldn't like it and I tried something new the next time. If you go to the DC Comics website, they will put up like what are the issues coming out this week. You can click on them. They'll give a little like synopsis. It's obviously not going to tell you what the whole story is or anything, but it'll give you a little idea. But they also have the option where you can look at like what came out last week, what's coming out next week. And you can also like you can jump ahead and you can read sort of the solicitations, which is where they announce what is coming. They're usually 2 or 3 months ahead. So that's where I find out what else I want to get. You know, like several months earlier, I was like, oh, they're making a Freedom Fighters series. It takes place on Earth 10 where the Nazis win the war. And then I tell the guy at the comic book shop, I say, I really want to get Freedom Fighters. And he says, great, I'll bring that in. But you can do that too and just not have to tell them, right? You could say like, oh, I'm really interested. Like Female Furies is coming out next month. And then when you go in, you can say like, do you have Female Furies? You can grab it off the shelf and give it a go, test it out.
You could also do what I do, which is often a lot of these single issues are eventually part of a larger story.
Yes.
So, I mean, much like you would with a TV show, you can wait till the season's over and watch the whole thing or read the whole thing at once through what are called trades. Yeah. Most often, a lot of the bigger trades, newer trades, most comic book shops will have them once they've been released. And you can very easily just look through them and decide if you want to buy them or not. That's a good way to get into comics as well, is to pick up some of the bigger trades. I think I've mentioned it on some of the previous podcasts, but if you go to some of the like more commercial bookstores even, they tend to sell the more popular trades. And so you can pick up there, but you can also just go to the comic book shops and talk to them and go like, I'm looking to get in this character as a trade. And the reason why I like trades is, sometimes with the single issues, I mean, at least with a TV show, you have about a half an hour of watching. You can go through in a single issue, and it's just a matter of a couple of minutes, and
that's true.
And then it's just over, and you don't know if you even like it because
then you have to wait a month,
and you don't even really know if you're enjoying the story because it's such a small portion of it. Yeah. So I like reading the trades because if it's been well recommended and somebody maybe at the shop has recommended, there's a good chance it's going to be a good book, and you can really dive into this whole thing and take a whole like a day to go through it.
Now, I mean, that's just how I sort of pick things out or test new things. But yeah, like you said, I mean, like I don't have unlimited comic book budget. I wouldn't have a marriage if I had unlimited. I was going to say,
budget. As often said by your wife, you don't have an unlimited comic book budget.
She said it to me before I came here today.
Yeah. It's how she sees you off to work every day. Here's your lunch. I love you very much. You don't have an unlimited comic book budget. Good night, sweetie. Yeah, good night. Remember, you do have a good limited comic budget.
There's a tape that plays on loop under my pillow. That
actually, we've written our own vows.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, I kind of have my sort of internal list of like, what are characters that I really love versus what are stories that I'm really enjoying. Cause like, I will go through, you know, some lean times with Flash or Aquaman in a way that I won't with Superman.
Really?
Like I've been reading Action Comics for a while now because I've really liked it.
Yeah.
If it got to the point where I wasn't liking it and I was up against my budget wall, that would go before Flash, Aquaman. You know, I had a Green Arrow run that I really liked, and then I knew that the writer and artist were leaving, and I knew that other books were coming out that I wanted to get. So Green Arrow wasn't even on my chopping block, but because I knew I was adding things to the list, like Hawkman and stuff like that, I was like, I need to cut something. I'm sorry, Green Arrow, but you know, you're getting a new creative team anyway. I'll drop you now, and then maybe I can get a trade later with like when the new team has taken over and they have a trade out. So there's a couple of little strategies and things like that. But I mean, for me, the big ones are like characters that I love, like Flash and Aquaman. And then I will always get a book like Justice League because odds are if something big is happening that's going to affect everyone, you know, like a big Justice continuity thing, it'll at least be referenced in Justice League. So that's a way to keep my finger on the pulse of like what is happening canonically. There's a couple of things like that too that are like almost more like strategy plays. Justice League right now is very good, but I've held out through some pretty boring runs of Justice League to get there. You know, but I'm always there because I'm like, what if something happens? So there's I'm playing a bit of a strategy game there.
I like it. This next question is a hefty one.
Okay.
Comes from another doctor.
Oh.
A Dr. Jaramoro.
Ooh. Like a real doctor?
I mean,
I'm a real doctor.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on
Not a doctor.
Nice. This other doctor asks, for a long time, I've wondered what is the world our heroes live in. More so DC main continuity, because to me that seems more shrouded in mystery. Marvel has its benchmark world timelines: Earth X, Old Man Logan, Days of Future Past. I see Marvel's gotten less pop, no quasi-modern Beatles popping around modern Marvel. And to tell the truth, I see so little main timeline continuity in this issue to care. But number 99 of your catalog, with mention of the sub Diego, just really ran it home. What is the DC world? Is San Diego still submerged? Does everyone know Bruce Wayne as Batman's benefactor? World-altering fights? What is the current continuity's landscape? Is Trump president?
Ooh, I don't think Trump has been confirmed as president in current DC. So those things that I talked about, like Sub Diego, when San Diego is sunk into the sea, but everyone survives magically and becomes basically like Atlantean.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't an Elseworld. That was the continuity. But again, we're coming back to this question of canon, right? Yeah. Thus far, since the New 52, like since Flashpoint changed everything, I don't think there has been a canonical reference to Sub Diego.
Have they talked about San Diego?
I think you just assume San Diego exists,
okay.
But I'm pretty confident in saying that Sub Diego has not happened in this continuity.
Okay.
It's not a thing.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne as Batman's benefactor. That is a thing because Batman Incorporated was still part of the New 52. So that was the premise where Bruce Wayne, in a weird sort of double bluff Kaiser Soze kind of thing, basically publicly announces that he is funding Batman around the world, and that weirdly distances him from suspicion of being Batman. So, but Batman Incorporated was part of the New 52. That was like a Bruce and Damian kind of series. So that is definitely canon. I mean, I would say still canon is like Luthor knows who Batman is.
Oh.
And Luthor's not even on the Justice League anymore. Like he's full villain again. So that's particularly dangerous. But yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those things where like I can't go through every detail of what is or is not continuity, but many things, most things in some way. And here's the thing. All it would take is in the next issue of Aquaman for someone to say something like, do you remember when San Diego got... And then we go like, okay, some version of Sub Diego happened.
Yeah.
Like literally all it would take is someone to mention it. And now it's like, oh, okay, never mind. It is canon.
Yeah.
I'm only saying it's not.
Because we haven't heard
definitively, because no one has said that yet.
Yeah.
But that they could undo everything I just said next issue, right? That's the thing with canon, is that there's never a final answer. But the current landscape, there's a sort of an era, I would say, sort of between like Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis. And that's probably the era that's maybe the most in flux, the most like, we're not sure whether or not that happened.
Yeah.
I think things sort of leading to Infinite Crisis, a lot of those generally existed, unless you're a sidekick. That kind of stuff got messed with a lot. Like if you're, a Wally West or a Garth or some of them, or Donna Troy. But basically I'd say Final Crisis onward and anything like pre-Zero Hour is pretty much some version of it, slightly tweaked, has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's, also, is Trump president?
I don't think so. I haven't seen an issue with Trump as president.
Oh, thank God.
I miss all those issues with the cool black guy's president, though.
Yeah.
Jeez,
don't we all?
Fun fact for those who want to escape to a happier place.
Oh, yeah.
Earth 23 is the home of President Superman, Kal-El from Vathlo Island on Krypton. And he's basically a cool black president Superman based on Barack Obama.
So awesome. Oh, the better times.
If only we could retreat to Earth 23.
So true. Well, the next and last question would be fitting, of course, to end with this person, which is Dave Rossi.
Oh, Dave. Turn off the podcast. This is for Dashiell.
Yeah. This isn't for you. I'm going to pretend that this is
our inclusive episode. We kick him out.
Dave asks, this is a great question. Dash and I have played the Injustice and DC Lego video games.
Sure.
As have we.
Great games.
Yeah. As well as the DC HeroClix miniatures.
Oh, wow.
And DC Legacy deck building game. Do you know of any other DC games, old or new, that we should seek out and play that can help immerse us in the DC universe? We also recently started playing D&D. Is that anywhere in the DC brand catalog? Thanks, guys, and thanks for an episode we can enjoy together.
Now, I'm not so sure where like the tabletop side stands, to be honest. But if you're talking about immersive, and frankly, if we're talking about role playing, there's the game I would recommend is DC Universe Online. It's an MMO. It's like playing World of Warcraft or something like that, but it's set in the DC universe. So you build your character, you decide what they look like. There's you decide like how they move, and that's either flight or agility, which is sort of like a Batman type movement style with like grappling hooks and things like that, or super speed, like Speed Force. Yep. And then you also decide what their power set is. So there's like freezing powers or fire powers or earth powers or like celestial powers or will or fear, or like there's a few different ones you can pick. And basically you make a character, and then as you play through, you level up, you learn new skills and new abilities. The main sort of hub worlds are like Gotham and Metropolis, but you also get to eventually go to other places like Central City. You get to I think you can go to like New Genesis and Apocalypse now. And it adapts a lot of storylines too, like Blackest Night and things like that. You fight alongside heroes like the Teen Titans or like Wonder Woman and the Green Lantern Corps and stuff like that. You fight all sorts of villains, from like Ultra Humanite to Intergang to Grodd to like it really spans sort of DC continuity. And it's a role-playing game. It's totally immersive. You can customize how you look, and like you make your cool outfit. You can get a lair, like a secret base, make your own like supercomputer and things like that. And because it's online, if you do happen to have a bit of community, like you can find other people to play with. You guys could play together. Yeah, I mean, I played that game for a very long time. Right now I'm playing the Lord of the Rings MMO, and that's extremely immersive. I'm like very deep into that right now. But that DC one, I played it for a very, very long time. I think that was a fun game. I like that one.
Yeah, I think that also the Arkham games.
Sure, yeah.
Those are really great. They do a really good job of like introducing you to the characters. And, for board games, there was one that I played when I was a kid. And I think it came out in like the early to mid 80s, called Superpower Skyscraper Caper.
Oh my God. It sounds awesome.
Yeah. And it's basically like it's a 3-dimensional board game.
Okay.
And so you build this like giant skyscraper, and you play as like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman,
right,
Aquaman. And you have to like basically climb up the skyscraper and knock off villains off the skyscraper.
What?
Yeah.
That sounds odd. I wonder how hard that would be to find now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wonder if it's on, let's see. I wonder if it's on Amazon. It says that there is. It's an old, it's definitely an older game, but I remember it being really, really cool. So,
and you had that?
I played it at somebody's house.
Oh, okay, I see. That sounds pretty cool.
I remember it being awesome because I was just like, you can have a 3D game?
Yeah, no kidding. That is pretty cool.
But if you can get our hands on that, it's definitely worth playing.
And if you liked Injustice, but you want the graphics to be a little bit worse, you can always play Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's more violent than Injustice, so that's probably a fair game.
There is a Teen Titans app, Teen Titans Go app on the iPhone. I haven't played it yet.
Oh, I haven't played that yet.
But apparently there's a I've seen it. So
I do like Teen Titans Go. So.
Yeah. So it's Teen Titans Go. I just don't know what the mechanics of it are, but it's definitely worth trying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, like video games are the best because you really get a better sense of the characters.
If you're super into stuff like D&D, you can also get like the packages for those, what do they call them? Like GURPS, like generic universal role-playing games.
Yes.
It's like just the skeleton of an RPG, but you really need to put in some like solid DM time to like build
make
the
it
world,
a story
make the story, flesh out like which characters sort of fit which like skeletons.
Yeah.
You know, like what is the equivalent of a paladin in DC? You know, what's the equivalent of, like you have to do that kind of work. But I mean, if you're into that, you can also like craft your own. Even just using like the monster manual from D&D, you just change like names instead of calling them.
Is there a part of you
now
that
they're like they're the dominators or whatever? You can do that.
There's moments where I don't think I'm a dork, and then I hear you say something like that, and I get like excited, like chill down my spine, where I'm like, God, that would be fun to like spend the time to like figure out who is who. And
yeah, I mean, if I didn't have a full-time job, I would do that.
Oh, if you didn't have a full-time job, I'd
subscribe to our Patreon.
Yes, make it so that we can just.
Now is a good time to bring up.
If we get to
that, I still have a full-time job. We need more subscribers.
If we get to $10,000 a month, we will quit our jobs and start.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We will quit our jobs, do this full time, and start playing. We will make a role playing D&D DC style
game. I will
game.
willingly make 40 hours a week worth of content if that's what I had to do to make a living.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I think that's a fair.
So tell all of your friends.
Yeah, exactly.
To sign up for the It's so craven.
All right. Well, before we move on, we do have one final piece of thing before.
Right.
But before we do that, we have one more before that. We have another surprise.
A surprise?
Yeah.
What?
A surprise for the doctor.
What is happening?
It's another one from Josh Gill.
What?
Yeah, I know. He's really making us hate ourselves.
Are these just like delayed getting here?
Yeah.
Or is this just like...
No. I'm not torturing you by like every day like.
Well, I didn't know if this was just like. Yeah.
It's Josh Gill in a box.
I was gonna make my usual joke when you hand me something like this, but then I thought it was inappropriate.
Generally, if it's a joke about me handing you something, I'm sure it's inappropriate.
I was gonna say, what's in the box?
Oh, yeah.
Please don't watch that movie. Dashiell, turn off 7.
Yeah.
Oh my God! What is happening, Josh?
Oh my God!
What?
Oh
it's
my
Teen
God!
Titans Go, Robin and Time Cycle.
That
what? Josh, what are you doing?
We already hate ourselves. Why?
You are... That's awesome. I don't have the right words for that. Thank you. Obviously, those are the words. But yeah. Oh my God, this is awesome.
Amazing gift from a fan and member of this podcast, Josh Gill.
My goodness.
Right?
I feel terrible.
I know. Yeah.
This is great. This makes me feel happy. I feel undeserving.
Yes.
That's maybe the best way to put it. This is very, very sweet. Thank you.
Though if you residents want to send us stuff, by all means, send me an email and I can give you our address.
We flip between genuine and like begging very quickly.
Yeah, that's me and generally my whole life. Well, with that, we're heading on to this week's everyone's favorite segment, the one we dread the most.
Yeah.
This week's Dial Doc. You want to explain what Dial Doc is a little bit before we get into this?
Sure. Brendan Flick mentioned Hero as a series. It's based on a thing called Dial H for Hero. It's basically this dial, and when you dial Hero, it turns you into a random superhero for like an hour or so. And this used to be like a thing where people would write in like a silly idea that would never sustain itself. But
it's like it's a standalone comic book.
But you could do it for like a fun couple of pages, or it's like a weird one-off. They're basically, it's like, used to be like a book of cameos, basically.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't turn into existing superheroes. They would be made up, something fun. So we do that every week, and we never prepare for it.
Nope. More
I want to say that it's deliberate, but I just always forget.
I'd write the notes.
We've
prepare.
been doing this for months, and I always forget.
Yeah. That being said, you want to go first?
Yeah. Do you know what? I do want to go first.
Do you?
Yeah.
Just building up towards that.
Oh, it'll be worth it.
Yep.
Stay with me.
Oh, yeah.
His name is King Pig.
Is this like Spider-Ham, but Kingpin is a...
No, I wasn't even thinking of that. Oh, that's so much smarter.
Well, it's Marvel anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, that's so much smarter.
What's King Pig?
Okay, King Pig is basically he's a person who can control pigs. He's the King Pig.
Oh.
So he doesn't control them like by mind control. He's not coercing them. He controls them because he's literally their monarch. They respect his office. Like his like divine authority over them.
It's the popper of pork, the King Pig.
Yeah. So King Pig immediately commands swine respect, and they'll do anything.
You swine.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
it. That's all I've got.
Yeah, you really put the whole hog into that one.
Careful. We're so close.
So close.
We're so close.
My character is Ink Spot.
Oh. Okay.
Who can go into books and drag people into the stories within narratives.
Oh.
And has the
Wait, like Page Master?
Yeah. Sort of, yeah. But it's called Ink Spot.
Right, totally different.
Yeah, completely different. But then has all of the abilities within those books, but the people who are running in don't have.
Oh, sorry. So, right, if you get pulled into like a Harry Potter book, then magic is real in that world and you can use it.
Yeah, yeah. Except for that you as a person who's dragged in there don't have those abilities.
Oh, so only Ink Spot gains the abilities of those fictional worlds, even though you can be dragged into them.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Yeah.
I think that would be really fun.
So like the Page Master.
And also that episode of Futurama.
Yeah.
Clearly you guys are smarter than we are and far more creative.
So much better at this.
Just better than us in every other possible way. And if you're a new comic book listener, a reader and new podcast listener, I'm sure that you could come up with very interesting things that no one's ever come up with before.
I sure hope so. I think we got one too. I wish I could remember what it was. Someone sent us one in the email.
Oh,
we got a dial doc. Next week.
Next week. We'll have it in next week. But we would love to hear what type of characters you residents can come up with. So just use the hashtag DialDoc and send us your idea for a hero or a villain, or maybe you just want to talk to us online. You can also just do that too. All you have to do is reach out to us on our various social media platforms. You can do so through our Facebook,
Dr. DC Podcast.
We have a Twitter
at Dr. DC.
Instagram,
Dr. DC Podcast.
You can send us an email,
drdcpodcast@gmail.com.
We talked about it a little bit before about online communities on Reddit. Well, we have our own online community.
It's r/Dr_DC.
That's right. You just go to reddit.com/r/Dr_DC. Yeah. Or you just write dr_DC in the search bar. It's Dr_DC. Yes. That's what it is. Jeez.
We're so lost without our usual crutches of insult and injury.
I'm running 2 days off of like maybe 4 hours of sleep.
Sure.
And my body being completely cleaned out from food poisoning. So I'm
your body and this episode being completely cleaned out.
That's right. So really put me on the crutches. But also, not only can you talk to us online, but you can also read some of our DC specific articles or buy some of our merch. Buy our merch. on our website.
drdcpodcast.com or .ca.
That's right. And also, you can call us on the phone. We just mentioned that, but we'll play the message we have next week. But the doc phone is now open. You can leave us a voice message. You don't have to actually... Don't worry, I won't pick up. I've got nothing else going on in my life. If it actually went to my phone, I would totally pick it up. But it doesn't. It's just a phone that you call, and you can leave a message for us online.
Might be over-explaining it.
Well, I don't know. Don't want to creep.
Do we have to pad the episode out? Is it not long enough?
No, actually, it's quite long. Leave us a voice message at 208-917-DCEU. That's 208-917-3238. And don't forget to rate and review us 5 stars on iTunes. We got 23 reviews right now. We just need to get to 30, so it's just a few more.
And what happens when we get to 30?
We're going to do a video live stream episode that we're going to be putting online. So you definitely want to, if you want to see our stupid faces talk about stupid things.
Hey,
stupid's not in it.
Come on, let's be positive though. We're so close.
So you want to see our handsome faces on this fantastic podcast
format?
Yeah, that's boat.
What a handsome format.
That's what they say about me. And then the final piece of information is we have a Patreon.
Patreon.com/DrDC.
That's right.
For only $5 a month, you get a full extra episode every week.
That's right.
Which is wild.
That's wild. That's wild.
I was about to do your Jefferson Pierce impression.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. Jefferson, that's wild.
Go to the Patreon. It's only $5 a month.
I like his crack in his voice. It's only $5.
16-year-old James Remar. That's my new character.
Would you like some fries with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Well, if you want more of this high quality content.
Hey, yeah, maybe that was a bad sell. Hey, Richard, what's your favorite month? Mine is merch.
Buy our merch.
Buy our merch.
We're really, should not be this long. It's a lot of dead air in this part. I'm going to do so much editing. Just us going like, don't say that. Nope. Don't say that.
This is really it's really exposed of
the crutch that we lean upon every week.
You know how we were feeling good about like our riffing and we're like getting a good sort of, like, improv.
We're so good at this.
I think we aren't.
No, I think we just say some mildly witty things in between a lot of swears.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to hear,
we're back to that next week.
Yeah, if you want to hear those swears, listen to the podcast next week. Same doc time, same inappropriate channel.
Boat.
Bye.
Adios.
Ciao.
Aquaman, all the superheroes. They always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure. They are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.